Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, Donald Trump posted on Truth Social that he has received a letter from Special Counsel Jack Smith's office telling him that he is a target of the January 6th investigation that office is conducting. Now, anyone who's been paying attention knew that Donald Trump was definitely the focus of that investigation, but it is nice for things to be made official. And now that Donald Trump is officially a target of Jack Smith's January 6th investigation, let's talk about what we know, what we don't know, and where things might go from here. Now, the first thing that we know is that Donald Trump is very likely to be indicted on charges related to the events of January 6th in the near future. And we know that because targeting letters are one of the final steps in an investigation, where prosecutors will go to a party and say, hey, we have substantial evidence that you may have committed a crime. Would you like to come into the grand jury and testify in your defense before we make a charging decision? And since Donald Trump is very unlikely to testify to the grand jury, the special counsel is going to proceed on their current trajectory, which is, of course, towards an indictment. However, what we don't know are the specific charges that are going to be brought as a part of this indictment, and that information would be very valuable in determining how serious a problem the former president is facing. However, based on the witnesses that have gone before the grand jury, as well as the evidence that has been publicly reported, we can at least take a general guess as to what these charges will focus on. And it appears that the focus is going to be more on the fake elector schemes and Donald Trump's influence campaign against the former vice president, as well as several state-level officials to attempt to change the results of the 2020 election. We've seen a number of the fake electors go before the grand jury, as well as subpoenas issued to both the Arizona and Georgia state governments for records and testimony regarding President Trump's attempt to contact those state governments and convince them to change their results. So, given that, we know the general idea of what the special counsel is going after, but we're going to have to wait for the indictment to come out in full before we know the specific crimes that Donald Trump is alleged to have committed in the lead up to January 6th. Another thing we know is that the case against Donald Trump is going to be very strong, and there are two reasons that we know this. Number one, we can look at the indictment that the special counsel brought against the former president in the Mar-a-Lago documents case. Even a lot of Donald Trump's most ardent supporters had to admit that when that indictment was released, it was really well put together and that Donald Trump might actually be facing some serious legal jeopardy. And if they're willing to break out of their echo chamber and actually admit that Donald Trump is in trouble, you know that the special counsel has put something pretty solid together. But even if we couldn't judge Jack Smith by his past work, we still know that he's very likely to have put a very strong case together, as this case is going to be incredibly historically significant. Think about it. The special counsel is going to indict the former president in some way, shape, or form for attempting to overturn the results of a democratic election, violating one of the cornerstones of American democracy. That's a case that's going to face a lot of scrutiny both right now and in the future, so Jack Smith is going to want to make sure that everything his office has done is to the letter of the law, all T's crossed, all I's dotted, and that he is beyond reproach. So, with him even reaching this point in the investigation where he is ready to send out target letters and prepare for an indictment, I'm very certain that he has an exceptionally strong case that he is ready to bring to trial and eventually win. While we can be pretty confident in the strength of the special counsel's case, the same cannot be said for Donald Trump's legal defense, and most of that is because his lawyers don't know what the charges are going to be either, so they can't really prepare a specific legal defense just yet, but all in due time. Of course, the former president is going to continue with his vague attacks, accusations, and other threats against the prosecutor, the Department of Justice, the Democratic Party, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, and really anybody else he can think of, but at the end of the day, those are not legal arguments, so they won't really help him in court. So, once the indictment comes out and his lawyers are able to prepare a more formal defense, I'm going to be paying close attention to the arguments that they make in order to determine how strong Donald Trump's defense might be relative to the strength of Jack Smith's indictment. The last thing I wanted to discuss is how this federal investigation might interact with the state-level case being brought by the Fulton County District Attorney in Georgia. Both cases revolve around election interference and are likely to cover some of the same alleged criminal behavior. However, I don't think we're going to see a ton of coordination on them in the prosecutorial sense, because at the end of the day, Jack Smith is bringing a federal case for violation of U.S. law, whereas Fani Willis would be bringing a state-level case for violation of Georgia law. They're going to be tried in different court systems. There's going to be slightly different rules of evidence and courtroom procedure. And depending on what charges each of the prosecutors bring, they might even be arguing radically different cases depending on what their burden of proof is for their respective charges. So I wouldn't expect to see a lot of substantive coordination between the two different prosecutors. However, where they will have to coordinate is scheduling. Because they're going to be covering some of the same behavior, I'm sure, they're going to have to coordinate witnesses, evidentiary documents, and of course the defendant, as Donald Trump is very likely to be one of the defendants at least in both cases. So I think there's going to be a lot of scheduling concerns that need to be straightened out, and that might be why they're trying to get their indictments to come out around the same time, just so that the courts are aware that both cases are out there and they can make scheduling decisions based on that fact. Now, of course, we'll have to see how everything shakes out and how these indictments might play out in both cases, but at the end of the day, I would expect them to focus more on deconflicting schedules than actually cooperating to pursue prosecution and eventual victory in court. So, those are the things that stood out to me. If there's anything you all want to know more about, of course, leave me a comment, and I'll do my best to get you more information. However, we put everything else aside, the one thing I am exceptionally confident in is that this news is not good for the former president. Think about it.